Sakino, please tell us your life story, please.
Thank you. Well, it's always a very exciting moment when I start talking about my life. And it has always been like that. It's not something that comes to me and I'm doing it. I'm excited. My heart is pounding. And yeah, it's like revealing, stripping myself naked. I will start with the beginning. Because I think that's always for me. It's the most important thing that I came from a family in West Germany, a very small Catholic, very Catholic village, and I was the second born of 10 children. My mother had a son before me who died 1 hour after birth, and then she got very quickly pregnant. My parents were Catholic, as I said. They came from extremely Catholic, rigid Catholic backgrounds. And so for them, I think when they got married, which was 1 year after the war, after the Second World War, being married meant you have children because sex was only inside the marriage and it was only for the purpose to have children. But I also have to say the physical condition of my mother to have children wasn't really very good. She had bad conditions. Her womb uh, wasn't really okay to have children. But she had no choice. She had no choice. That's what she always said. So her first child was died. He was a premature birth, and he died 1 hour after birth. She got very quickly pregnant with me, and she was all the time during the pregnancy with me. She was in danger of losing me. So for a big part of the pregnancy, she was lying in bed, and I think she was very, very afraid. This is my perception, or my body memory says she was afraid. And I must have had to survive already in the womb, because also the birth was very heavy and very difficult. And both of us were almost dying during the birth, but I came out alive. And I think this is the basis for who I am, who I have become, is an extremely strong will to survive any circumstances. And I can see it and feel it in all my life situations that I have been through, starting from very early age. The circumstances of our family weren't really very good. My father, this is important for, it always has been important for me to take into consideration when I talk about my life. My father was the youngest of 8 children, and his mother was pregnant with him when his father died in the First World War from diabetes in a training camp in Berlin. So my grandmother, being pregnant with my father, must have also been under extreme stress. So, and he was the youngest. So she raised 8 children without a father. What was said about my father before the war, he was born 1917. And what was said about him before the war, he was a very lively young man. Being the youngest, He obviously didn't have so many obligations, but also in a already traumatized family. Then he met my mother in 1937 something. They got engaged, and then in 1939 the war started, so they did not marry. And he entered the Nazi Party in 1941, which he always denied. But I found the papers later. And uh, he entered the Nazi Party. He was becoming he was a soldier then, and he was in with his unit. They were in Russia, in Minsk, in White Russia, at a time when the Jewish population of Minsk was murdered, and he was part of that. So he was in the war in Russia from 42 till the end. He was captivated, captured for a while, and then when he came back, he was changed. He was broken. He became very violent. He became an alcoholic, unpredictable. And this is important to know because that was the start of my life with an unpredictable father and a very afraid and very devoted and depressed mother. So from the moment I was born, I had the feeling I have to fight. I have to fight for my life. I have to fight for being me. And I obviously was a very lively child because I was disciplined, beaten very, very frequently, almost daily, from very early age. And after me were, as I said, 8 more children, basically, but the last one was born dead. So I grew up we were 8 children. I was the oldest of the children, and I would say my duties were manifold, as it was usual in that time, in that area. The older ones had to take care of the younger ones, and it wasn't asked if they liked it or if it was pleasant. It was just as it was. Two things I'm grateful for my mother. One is that she gave me birth despite her bad condition and despite her depression and fears. And the second thing was that when I went to elementary school, the teacher in that school, she promoted that I would go to a gymnasium, to a high school, because she said I am too intelligent to stay in the elementary school. And she talked to my mother, and she really convinced my mother to convince my father. Now, my mother could not convince my father because my father was completely against any of his children growing out of our circumstances. He didn't like the idea better than him. I think that was his biggest fear. Even though later he expressed in front of relatives that he was proud of me, but inside the family, it was not well received. But my mother, she fought it through. And this I am really grateful for, because without that I wouldn't have studied, I wouldn't have gone out of that village. As I said, it's a very conservative area of Germany, and women, girls, they weren't supposed to go out and study and do their own things. They were supposed to get married and have many children, and that was and maybe at the most they could learn to be a salesperson, in a shop, or being a hairdresser. Uh, that was the utmost of professions that was allowed for girls. But so I went out and I studied psychology, and against the will of my father. And I think my mother promoted that because she grew up in a house, also very Catholic, very conservative, but her father wanted that all his children would learn a profession. So my mother had learned to be a tailor. And she was a master tailor before she married my father. And then, of course, she gave up her profession, which she always regretted. My mother wasn't a typical housewife. She hated housework. She could not cook. Whenever she was cooking, it was horrible. She liked to be outside in the garden and grow with the plants and everything. And she liked to sew, to make clothes for us, which was very convenient because we didn't have money. So she made clothes for us from anything that was uh, available, old curtains or old uniforms from my father. She took anything and made something from it. And she was very good at tailoring. And I learned it from her. So for a long time when I was studying and I had no money, I was making all my own clothes because I'd learned how to do it from her. Um, my both my parents were very unhappy with the way I went in my life. When I went out to study, I first went to Göttingen, which is a middle, big but very cute city, university city in mid-Germany. And then I went to Hamburg with my boyfriend. But my parents both were really unhappy about my development because I became more and more independent. I mean, first of all, I have to say that I left my house, my home, my family at the age of 18, the moment I studied, because it was, as I said before, it was an extremely violent situation. My father was absolutely violent, unpredictable, sexually abusive towards me. And I just left one day. I think it was when I must have been 18 or something. He came again, and he was like totally horrible, unspeakably horrible. And the next morning, I packed my stuff and I just left. And I never went back home to stay there. I visited sometimes, but I never went back. And then when I talk about that, it's like it's still breaking my heart when I think about the situation and the circumstances. And I always envy people who have a good relationship to their parents or their siblings. I even don't have a good relationship with my siblings. We are so estranged through what I am doing, how I'm living my life. It's not that they are bad people, not at all. They are beautiful people, in their own way, but we have nothing in common. So there is a huge estrangement from my family of origin, which makes me sometimes really sad when I hear of other people who have beautiful relations with their siblings and their parents, because I don't. And for a long time, I wasn't really aware of that. I wasn't even aware of why I was choosing particular lifestyles. Like when I lived in Hamburg and my mother had died. She died 1979 of a brain stroke. Not brain stroke, aneurysma in the brain, which exploded. And after that, I got tuberculosis, and I was in a sanatorium for a long time, many months. And after that, I kind of felt I had to do something. So I went into therapy, and I went into a spiritual community. I became a sannyasin. And but when I look back at that, it's for me, it's now, from looking back from now, it was, everything was searching for a home, searching for, to feel at home, to feel belonging in, to a to a family, to a family of choice, which of course turned out to be not possible, because no there is no possibility that there can be a substitute for the family of origin in that way, that it fills those very early childhood needs that weren't fulfilled then. So at this point in my life, I've come to uh, somehow, yeah, how can I say? I'm not searching for that anymore. This for sure. Um, I am. I have a chosen family, as I call it. I have very dear and close friends who are my family, my chosen family. I was married, just to add that, and I also thought, yeah, that marriage would be forever and would be my home forever. But we got divorced 11 years ago, and again, it was not easy to handle that. And I'm still, at sometimes, I'm struggling with not having a partner at this time in my life. As I'm getting older, I'm entering my 73rd year, and to live in a way that I'm able to resource myself, to fill that void, that gap, or that hole that hasn't been filled when I was a child, is a daily task, is a daily conscious, how can I say, conscious choice to feed and heal myself from that hasn't been fed at that time. And when I say choice, uh, I'm also, sometimes it's not even a choice, it's a struggle. It's a daily struggle. It's a daily, every morning when I wake up, I have to remind myself to be grateful that I'm alive, and to be grateful that I have that work that fills me, that is so satisfying and so healing for me. I guess I'm doing my work because I'm healing myself with it. and to share myself with such beautiful people on a daily basis. Well, I see I'm jumping from one point to the other. Uh, I do have chosen family. I have a family here in Berlin, a God family, I call them. I am the very close friend of both parents. I was witness to their wedding, a witness for both, and I'm godmother to both their children, which is very unusual because usually children each have their own godmother or godfather. So that's my chosen family. Then there are other chosen families that I have and godchildren, which I'm very grateful and happy about. And there is something in me that starts being grateful also to be able to be on my own, to enjoy my solitude, to have created a home for myself, which you see in the background, the wall with the pictures, the Buddha in the back. Those are my resources. Those are things that I have created. And also to be able to create my own life the way that it sustains me, like creating an income for myself, things like that. And it's very beautiful for me now while I'm talking to you to see your faces and to see how I am received. It's very beautiful. I've chosen my profession because I wanted to help people. I remember the day when, or the day, but the time when I was deciding to do that was when I was around 16, I think. Must have been that age, 16, 17. And I was in a monastery gymnasium with nuns and very Catholic again. And we went at that time, all the classes went to, uh, they weren't called meditation camps, but it was kind of meditation camps in the Catholic Church. Like we had to stay in a monastery for a week and be in silence and pray and all of that. And there was a priest, and he was one of the very first people in my life who listened to me and who I could talk to and open up to. And I remember that at that time, I decided I want to be a person like that too. I want to be a person that listens to people and helps them, that is open for the suffering of others and wants to support them to get out of the suffering. And that was the moment when I decided to become a psychotherapist, a psychologist. And then I studied. I studied psychology and I did all of that. And that's another, actually, very long story, which is also interesting. The way I took in the psychology, starting after the diploma with with handicapped children, working with handicapped children and their families, and from there coming to family therapy.
Akino,
And yes,
5 more minutes.
okay, thanks. Um, yeah, developing all these, or going all these steps through this. I think I started with client-centered therapy, the Rogers approach. And then when I worked with the handicapped children, I had to study behavioral therapy because with handicapped or um, children who cannot speak and who have no capacities to communicate with words, you cannot do client-centered speech therapy. So we worked in different ways with behavioral therapy and things like that. And then I realized I can only work with children when I include the parents and the families. So that's where it started with family therapy, which then led me to study with Virginia Satir. Um, and and in my own therapy, which was starting parallel to the systemic, I realized how much I had to express all those emotions that were still stuck in my body and in my psyche. I had totally uncontrolled anger outbursts, which I denied to have. And I was also having nervous breakdowns in particular personal situations, which I couldn't explain to myself. I was just starting screaming and breaking down. Like, I mean, you could not imagine me doing that right now because I'm not the same anymore. But at that time, I was known as someone who is totally hysterical. In my 20s, I was known for being a hysterical person. I would freak out frequently. I would just scream and be outraged and ah, unbelievable, unbelievable for me. Looking back, I can see how much I have done to be who I am today. But without all of that, what I did, I wouldn't be able to sit here. Certainly not. So I owe this priest that I am a therapist. And I owe another man, Dan Baron, who I haven't talked about at all in this half hour. I owe Dan Baron that I came to Israel, that I'm working in Israel now. And that's what I call my second home. And I always call it the land of my soul, or the home of my soul, because I think there is something that pulled me to come to Israel, which is beyond my conscious knowledge. When I talked with Irvin Yalom, the American psychotherapist, he said maybe one point of or one part of that is that you want to make amends for what your father did, and yes, that's true. But I think there's something more to it. It's not only that. It's much more deep rooted. And when we saw the movie yesterday, and this one man said that when his father died, the amends were made for what his father did. So he, as the son, doesn't have uh, an obligation to make amends anymore because his father did. And yesterday dawned to me for the first time, my father committed suicide in 1985. And so he made his amends by committing suicide. So my working in Israel and doing all this healing work must have also other reasons, other things that I might not even see right now.
Thank you, Sakino, for sharing your life story.
Thank you.
Are you open for questions from the others?
Yes. So if questions that you want to know, I'm very happy to. Yes.
When I just met you, I saw your family name, Sternberg, that is very Jewish uh, name. I have one of my best friends, she's Sternberg, and you're very similar. You are looking like her. It was very interesting. So, can you say something about the Sternberg?
Yes, I can. It's the it's the family name of my ex-husband, which I kept after the divorce because I love this name so much. And also, I love my ex-husband still a lot. We are now good friends, so I could keep it with a good feeling. And the interesting thing is that uh, it is a Jewish name, and his father did a lot of research to find out if they are Jewish, but it's not. His father was a Protestant priest in the, I don't know, 13th generation after Luther. So that line is not Jewish, but his mother was Jewish. Her name was Wolf, and a cousin of my ex-husband researched in the family, and recently we found out that in that line there is even someone who has a stumbling stone in Berlin, but that's the name Wolf, or Wolf, not Wolf, which is also a Jewish name. So yes, Sternberg is, and I think I also kept it because it has this Jewish resemblance, which I totally love. Yeah.
Sakino, thank you so much for sharing. I was listening to the role of religion in your story. Would you like to elaborate more about this?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, the role of religion in my family of origin was very, very big. It was the main uh, value system in our family, the Catholic value system. We were brought up with prayers every morning, every evening, um, before and after every meal. Um, we were going to church at least 2-3 times a week, every Saturday, every Sunday, Sunday twice, and all the values came from there. Everything. And to live according to the rules was a guarantee to go to heaven after death. To live against the rules was the clear way to hell. So when I started studying and I had my first boyfriend and we were not married and we had sex and we lived together, my mother was devastated, absolutely devastated. My father told me once, your mother is screaming and screaming and screaming out of despair about your lifestyle. And my mother at some point even said that if one of her children would leave the church, she would wish that that child would not have been born. That's how strict it was. And I was very, very faithful when I was a child, because it was one of my very few uh, uh, things I could hold on to be in church, to pray, it was not a warm feeling, but it was some kind of a attachment that I could hold on to. But then later, when I came out and I studied and I had my boyfriends, and then all this came to me, like my mother's despair and all these double morals. There were stories in our parish, like when a girl had an illegal child, like outside marriage child, she was forced to give the child away. And this was all, more and more it dawned on me that these values were double bind. There were double standards. People were not, and also all the violence in our family, and all the sexual harassment and everything that happened inside the family, and the family rules that everything that happens inside the family stays in the family. So we weren't even able to talk about it. My cousins and all the relatives, they didn't know what happened inside. They were very, so my cousin who I interviewed in my work with Dan Baron when I did family research, she was so shocked to hear about the violence in my family. Nobody knew. And so all these double standards and all these lying and this made me leave the church when I was 25. And I'm not sure. I wish I could be a believer, because it makes for many people it makes life so much easier. But I'm not. I I don't know. I don't know. I don't think there is a God in the sense of a person, but I can see that there is a universe or a universal creative force that's there, because there must be something that creates all of this. But I'm more in the not knowing state than ever before. Okay, thank you.
So Kino, thank you first of all for your story, sharing your story. I was very overwhelmed all along while you were talking without thoughts. I was crying and felt a lot of, I don't know if it was like yours or humanity, or if it was collective, but I felt very sad and grief, a lot of grief with the pain I felt in my body. And I found myself a few times like trying to like escape from it, going back to my mind and putting myself back in my body. And I didn't feel that it's personal for me. Like I was just listening, I was just opening, and I felt all the energy flowing through me. And it was a lot of sadness and even depression and despair and sorrow, deep, deep grief. And I just wanted to reflect it here, to put it here. And one more thing, I just wanted to ask you, and you quite half answered about your belief in a higher power. And I wonder what gives you the strength. What is your like most solid belief, because none of us is not a believer. We cannot believe in something, but we can believe in something else. Like we can believe we don't believe, but there is no not believe. I don't feel like even atheist people, they believe in something else. And I wonder for you, what is your, I forgot the word, איך אומרים עוגן? Anybody?
Anchor. Anchor.
Anchor. What is your spiritual anchor that is holding you in tough times?
Thank you for asking that question. Well, it is uh, it is a knowing that I am not alone. It is a deep trust that I'm held. And I don't know, I mean, I'm very hesitant to say by what. But let's say when I'm doing the work and I'm doing family constellations, for instance, or when I'm working with someone, also individually, I always feel that I'm not alone, that I am supported, that I'm carried by something that's not only me and inside of my individual being. And some would say it's ancestors, which I think there is some truth in that we are held by the ones before us. Some say we are standing on their shoulders. But I wouldn't even put it in those specific words, but there is a deep knowing and feeling and perception that I am held and guided, and that I trust very deeply and profoundly. And especially when I'm in situations, which I am in some at times, when I'm afraid, when I'm afraid of dying all by myself, for instance, that's a fear, or that I cannot sustain myself, then I allow myself to go to that fear, through that state, and I'm always coming back to that deep existential trust of being held. This is all I can say, but it's very, very rooted. It's very deep. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's what I can say about it.
Thank you. It does. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have 2 more minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, ask. I don't want to call the names because we want to keep it as, so just ask.
Okay. First of all, Sakino, thank you so much for your sharing. You put in words feelings and emotions and that are so familiar to me. I have another thing to say and a question. When you say that you don't really understand why this connection, the connection with Israel, and you coming here, I felt in my whole body that you come here to teach something to all of us that cross your path. I'm talking about myself, but I feel that is much more than me, that you are giving us a gift. And thank you for that. My question is, you told about the violence in your home since you were born till you left. Did you have any period of denial or repression of events that you went through during the time that you lived with your parents and your family? Or you remember everything since then?
Well, I think in order to survive such a violent environment, you need to somehow also be able to forget events. But I cannot remember any period in that time that was not ruled by violence. Even though I would not remember every single detail.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember the atmosphere of violence being present 100% of the time. And I never denied, yeah, it's for me, it was always, and I think I was always very open about it, but the way I dealt with it, as I said, in my 20s, I was very hysteric. I dealt with it in a different way from how I deal with it now.
Mm-hmm.
But I never denied or repressed anything of that ever. On the contrary, I even am in conflict with my siblings about that, because it was not the same for all of us. It was me and two of my brothers and one sister who experienced that. And the others were spared. So everyone has a different memory of our childhood. So within our family, there wasn't like, oh yeah, we had a terrible childhood and that's how it was. No, some of us did not have that terrible childhood. They had a different one.
Thank you, Sakino, for sharing your life story and answering the questions.
Thank you for listening. I could really feel your presence, and it was very touching. Thanks. Thank you a lot.